just to mention, as I said, because we have the great reiterations outside, to mention some other reiterations. Now, mostly my reiterations are of the 20th and 21st centuries, but bear in mind that there are some earlier ones, and they're most interesting because they're peculiar to Monaghan and Fermanagh. It's a local school of headstone carving in the 18th century where people were accustomed to put memento mori symbols on headstones, the skull and crossbones, the coffin, the hourglass, the bell, and they were stock images really, and they were often very schematized, and the bell would just be a conventional bell, but not here, because this is not a conventional bell. What we're seeing here at Cleven in County Monaghan is surely an early bronze bell of the 9th or 10th century type, and the best one of all at Cleven is this one. This is a classic impression, I think, of an early bronze bell. The proportions, the shape of the handle coming right out to the edge, the slight flaring at the lip, it's actually, I'm sure, it's the closest thing they could have given us to a photograph of an early bronze bell. So that was circulating in that area. And I think that because so many of these bells, these mid-Ulster bronze bells, were put to use in parish churches, they weren't just about punctuating the liturgy, they were also about funeral accompaniment. So I think that because the bells were so embedded in funerary ritual, particularly in the 18th century when they'd been in use for 1,000 years, that's why they were chosen, not just some random bell, but a locally famous bell ended up being represented. And as I say, the Cleven ones are about the best and the finest, but we find them cropping up around Fermanagh. Galloon, for example, has a few nice ones, and there are several other sites. And Clonus as well has a few, and so they've commemorated that in this nice little limestone plaque just outside Tiernach's cemetery in the centre of Clonus, where we find the hourglass at the top, and there's one of the bells schematically reproduced down at the bottom, because as I say, the Clonus headstones also seem to be representing local bells. I think maybe they felt it was maybe a bridge too far to put any skulls on this, so they just stopped with these two emblems. And then because St. Patrick's bell is the cult of St. Patrick is the preeminent cult of medieval Ireland, as we all know, St. Patrick's bell does tend to crop up quite a bit. So we have the bell on the left and the shrine on the right. And I think we've probably got it at St. Nicholas's church in Carrick. This is the way they spell it, incidentally, St. Nicholas with an apostrophe. I would be inclined to put another S on the end, but that's the way they spell it. But on the outside of St. Nicholas's church, the chancel windows and the hood moulding on the chancel windows have stops, as they call them in the trade. So the stop is at the end of the hood moulding. And one of them, very conveniently, around the far side of the chancel is dated 1932. So we know that all this work was done in 32. And indeed, we know from plenty of records to say that tower and spire were restored in 1932. So what we have here, I think, is St. Patrick's bell in 1932, because it's schematic all right, but it's a little handbell, and these are shamrocks that are clustering all around it, and I think that's the clincher. This is St. Patrick's bell. And I think I've been trying to establish who designed this, because there's other interesting iconography on these windows. There's the 3 bags of gold that are associated with St. Nicholas. There's the arms of Carrick. There's a Pisces pair of fish symbol, other things. But there's also this, and it's well known who this is, because you'll even find this referred to in the Dictionary of Irish Biography entry for John Frederick McNeice, who was a very famous man in his day. And he was a rector of Carrick from 1908, and he was Bishop of Cashel, Emly, Waterford, Lismore until 1931. And I know in one of the later 1930s guidebooks for Carrick, St. Nicholas Church, we're told that McNeice paid for one of the windows. And obviously it's the window that he paid for that preserves his likeness, and you can find pictures of him online, and this is a pretty good likeness. So Cashel is written underneath him, and that's his crozier, I think, that you can actually see in St. Nicholas's Church to this day. So it may be that McNeice, the father of the poet, incidentally, McNeice indeed, he lived in what's now the Culloden on the way into town. He may have been the designer of these things, or at least given the germ of the idea to a designer, but it would be interesting to know. But the point about 1932, obviously, is that was the great patrician year, because of Patrick supposedly having come in 432. So the 1500th anniversary of his traditional arrival, commemorated by putting his bell on St. Nicholas's church. But I put this to the Carrick folks, and I don't think they'd cottoned on to the bell being Patrick's bell, but the shamrocks, as I say, clinch it. And then around the same time, we have a photographically exact rendering of the shrine of Patrick's bell down in Clonvarhan, which is just not a few miles past Castlewellan Catholic Church there. And an Italian firm of mosaic artists who had offices, works both in Carrara and in Belfast. Those were the days. They did this, and it's a very nice rendering of St. Patrick's Bell Shrine. The Ardagh Chalice is also beside this in the sanctuary area, and it's very nice too. And then we have this. I've never seen this, I confess. It was made in 1929 or thereabouts, when a relic of St. Bridget was brought back from Lumiar in Portugal for the endowment of St. Bridget's Church in Leicester. It's on the north side of Dublin, out on heading in the Howth direction. Now, unfortunately, this was stolen from the church in 2012. The relic wasn't in it, they just took the container. And as far as I can establish, it hasn't been found since. It would be I'd say very little monetary value. The thieves were probably sorely disappointed, but it is of great interest as yet another reproduction or another take on the Shrine of St. Patrick's Bell. Something very popular among workers in the early years of the 20th century. So one hopes it does turn up, and if it does, I'll certainly make it my business to see it. There's a sort of influence of joinery as well going on down around the bottom. This metal worker might have had woodworking leanings. And then this is something that I only became aware of within the last month. So I've not been over to see it. In the chapter house in St. Columb's Cathedral in Derry, there's a collection of silver. It's mostly a pretty recent date, and a lot of it very interesting. And it includes this. It's classified there as a ciborium, so a container for the communion bread. And it was made by Weirs of Dublin, Grafton Street jewellers. I think they're still trading. I don't buy a lot of jewellery myself, I'm not sure, but I think they're still there. Yeah, so obviously maybe some people here do buy a lot of jewellery. Anyway, this was made by Weirs in 1933. And again, it's another take on St. Patrick's Bell Shrine, but in a different kind of way. And Weirs being a company, I don't know who the individual maker was or the designer was, but it would be interesting to know, and maybe the Weirs company would have the records to tell us that. But the maker very inventively put a little ball foot on each angle, and that's borrowed not from St. Patrick's Bell Shrine, but from little Roman bells of about the 1st century AD. Little bronze bells from Roman context that have a little ball feet like this. And then St. Patrick's Bell Shrine again crops up in the memorial window to George Otto Sims in his own cathedral in Armagh. Here we have Columba's name is written here, but Columba, that refers to something above. But what we've got here is the shrine, and then the Book of Armagh, and then notionally the Bachaliasa, the Staff of Jesus, which was the medieval crozier of the abbots and then the bishops of Armagh. So these three insignia then. And of course, George Otto Sims, a very passionate historian in his own right, so they are appropriate to him for that reason. And then what wouldn't be immediately obvious is the bell connection with this one, so that's why I've juxtaposed the images. We have a quirky and strange 12th century bell from Ballymagorty, Scotch in South Donegal near Ballantrae. And on the right we have a monument in the same townland, and I'm sure the monument is really strangely based upon the profile of the bell. Otherwise it's hard to see where the design came from. The design on the right, 1955, it commemorates St. Asicus in Irish Tassach, and he was famous as a metal worker again. He's supposed to have been over at Slieve League in West Donegal. He's supposed to be buried here at this place Raku in Ballymagorty, Scotch. But he's also the patron of the Diocese of Elphin. And so the Diocese of Elphin in 1955, they commissioned this monument and had it put up outside their own diocese, but commemorating their man. And they kept the trade within the diocese as well, because the thing was made by Feely's of Boyle, and they're still trading today as Feely Stone, big company, monument and masons. And then of course we have this, which needs no introduction, but I thought I'd show you what's up now at the opposite end of the trail, which is another of Holger Lonza's pieces of work. This is the townland of Raheen Kyle, which is at the 9 Stones, just at the foot of Mount Leinster. There's a service road at this point, as there is, for example, at Divis or Slieve Croob. You can't take a car, but you can walk it if you like. And this bell is placed just adjacent because of the local programme of claiming Columbanus for this area, if I can put it like that. The fact is, there is something compelling, I suppose. If it isn't historical truth, you could say that there's maybe some kind of imaginative truth about claiming Columbanus for this area and putting a bell at the end of the roads there. Because we don't find the name of the provinces cropping up in place names very often. The names of the provinces are everywhere, but not in local place names. So they're constantly referred to, but they don't attach to places. And so there's something about it. Mount Leinster is just an Englishism, but one of the ancient names is Stua Lion. And so it was, and lion referring to Leinster. So this was in some way an archetypal, in some way a kind of quintessential Leinsterness about this hill, maybe. And Stua is a most interesting word, also Trua, and it just means an arc or an arch. And I've checked and I don't see it attached to any other landform. So that's another unusual thing. So it's like Leinster's triumphal arch or something. So if you like, if this was where there was some kind of essence of Leinster, and if the only thing we know about Columbanus is that he was a Leinsterman, that's all we're told in the famous life of Columbanus, written shortly after his time. The only thing they remembered on the continent was that he was from Leinster. So if you like, as I say, for imaginative purposes, you can say he's from this area, but we just have to remember it's not demonstrable. Now, the cloud is conveniently covering the transmitter on the top, which is an eyesore. But apart from that, it's a most beautiful landscape, but I don't recommend going up from that side or using the service road because it's kind of dull. I'd say go down through Bunclody, down to Ballycrystal in North Wexford. Lovely walk from there. Then once you get to this point, you have a lovely walk and you hardly notice the transmitter until it's in your face, and lovely landscapes and views en route. It's free as well. And then just to wrap up, in terms of later reiterations, the southern state liked to equip itself, I suppose, with reminiscences of antiquity, round towers, harps, wolfhounds. And this is another example. A bell commissioned for Shannon there in 1939. Don't know who the maker was, but it's clearly, you recognise, it's based on the Bell of Armagh, the one inscribed to Comascoch, the son of Allu. A nice little casting. Doesn't reproduce the holes in the faces, but it does reproduce the inscription. And it's not a bell, strictly speaking, it's a gong, so that the Cahirlach of the Shannon hits it with that little stick. And there's the two together. There can be no doubt as to the identification, but of course the bell in the Shannon is a lot smaller. And then a while, this is earlier, isn't it? The Dáil then had this one commissioned, and this was, or not so much commissioned as it was the brainwave of the widow of someone called Cooper who had been a TD. So this was commissioned, and it's a copy of the Loch Lane bell. And this time we do know the makers. It's the famous Edmund Johnson and Company, Moore Grafton Street Jewellers. They're no longer with us. But Edmund Johnson were great replica makers, and they were still in business, I suppose, until the 40s. But this is a very accomplished piece of silversmithing. And there's the two together. I think the silver bell is a little bit too slim, but it's about half size replica. And again, it's struck as well. You don't pick these bells up to ring them, you have to strike them. I was able in 2019, was lucky just before COVID, I was able to get into Leinster House and see both of these at first hand. It was quite interesting. And then, this is something I thought I would, and I'll wrap up now, I thought I would share with you. I wonder how well it's known here. In 1957, the Lord Mayor of London came to Bangor. Does anyone remember that visit of the Lord Mayor of London here in 57? There wouldn't be many people in the room who would. But anyway, that was Lieutenant Colonel Sir George James Cullen Welsh, 1st Baronet Chard in Somerset. He died in 1980, and army career, businessman and all that. So he was presented when he came to Bangor with this, what you see on the screen. Now, I've had a newspaper cutting on my file for probably decades, but I just actually only followed it up this week to see what I could tell you about this. So what the newspaper says, I don't even know what paper it is. It looks like the Telegraph to me. It says gift bell for Lord Mayor, and it says down below here we find written the ancient bell of Bangor, the silver replica of which made by Mr. James Warwick, headmaster of the Belfast College of Art, will be presented to the Lord Mayor of London when he receives the freedom of Bangor tomorrow. So this was presented to Cullen Welsh in 57 here in Bangor. And what we have on the left here is the original Bangor bell. So what we've got then beside it then is the silver replica. So it looks about half size. And I have another image of it, which I'll show you in a second, but you might wonder what's going on here. This thing looks like the post office tower. What's all this about? What looks like the post office tower is a cigarette lighter. And these two things are cigarette boxes. And this is a cover for what's beneath. And if it's sort of inappropriate, if you want the very epitome of what's inappropriate, maybe this is it, maybe you're saying. But at the same time, and that's why I suppose I never really pursued this. I just said, well, I'm not interested in the apparatus of cigarette smoking. But on the other hand, and these are just photocopies, obviously I've made scans of old photocopies, but on the right, I think we can just get enough of a sense of this to see this is a pretty accomplished piece of stuff. And I was just talking to Eileen Black, my former colleague in this museum the other day, and she remembers James Warwick. He was a well-known man in his art college role, and he was first head of the Crafts Council of Ireland. I established he was connected with NCAD in Dublin in an advisory capacity. Clearly an accomplished silversmith to make this. So I got in touch just with the Mansion House within the last week, and they were able very kindly, Andrew Ford, the curator there in the Mansion House, very kindly informed me they haven't got it. So Cullen Welsh must have kept it, he says. So maybe the family still have it, or maybe it'll turn up sometime in the sale room, but certainly from a Bangor point of view, despite the strangeness of the association, it is still a most interesting piece. And the bell itself is a standalone object. So as I say, it would be of great interest to be able to see them again and record them. And I just thought I'd put the two silver bells then together for comparison. Now I haven't got a silver version of the Loch Lane bell, I don't think there is any. But on my rambles in County Clare a few years ago, I just went to see the site where St. Shannon, the patron of that part of County Clare, South Clare, where he's supposed to have been born. He's supposed to have been born at this place, Molocha. And there's a holy well there, and somebody has put in this bell in the little sort of little hausheen beside the well. And the inscribed cross on this ceramic is closest to the Loch Lane form, to the Cashel form. So I think that this is probably a take on the Cashel bell rather than the Loch Lane one. And then we can follow the same saint to just a few miles away. This is between Kilrush and Kilkee, where his bell is supposed to, the saint's bell is supposed to have come to earth. Heaven sent bell, the best kind of bell. So this is a statue by Greg James, an Australian, I think from about the early 2000s. So this is St. Shannon, or Senan, or Simey. The name is sometimes anglicised locally, Simey. Anyway, here he is, and he's holding his bell. And again, this sort of familiarity of the cross on this, inscribed on the faces of the bells, like Bangor and the other two. Here it is again, another take on that, because we have a ringed cross in relief on St. Shannon's bell. And then, I haven't got a proper image of this, I had to lift this from the web, but this is St. Macreehey or Macreche at his church, which is, if you're golfing or surfing, it's just at the top end of Liscannor Bay. And he's got a bell in his hand, and it has a rope handle. interesting idea. I don't know where it came from, but of course a bell that had been long in use might well lose its handle and might well be given a handle made of rope. It's a nice idea, why not? And then, and I'm almost finished, a statue in Limerick City Museum Art Gallery by the famous Oliver Shepherd. Oliver Shepherd, a son of Cookstown, incidentally. Shepherd, famous for making the Cuchulainn statue in the GPO that we know has been used for political purposes here. But this is a less well-known statue by Oliver Shepherd, and it's called Fine Gael, and I put it to, and these are just like, again, lifted from the web, so they're not very sharp, but I've put it to the folks in Limerick, can they explain the name, what Shepherd meant? But there isn't any documentation to say what he meant by that. But we know that Bel means mouth, Belfast, obviously, and then Finn is fair or pale or sweet, and we find the word Finn attached to other bells in early Ireland, including a sweet sounding bell of St. Patrick's, the Finn Edith, and other bells called sweet sounding. So this figure, you can just make out maybe that she's holding her finger up, her mouth is closed and she's holding her finger up as though to say, you know, listen. And the action would be as though she's ringing the bell. So I suspect that the sweet mouth, if we translate this as sweet mouth, I think the sweet mouth is not hers, it's referring to the bell, or so it seems to me. This was presented to Limerick, or at least part of a bequest to Limerick by Lucy Gwynn, one of the famous Gwynn dynasty associated with Trinity. And then, because I said Scotland is in the story everywhere, I just haven't been able to cover it, I just thought I'd include one. The lost bell of St. Kentigern or Mungo, the patron of Glasgow, is one, although it's lost, it's one of the best documented bells that there is for the later Middle Ages. There must be about 15 or 16 separate references to the Glasgow bell being rung around the town, you know, on payment in order to call for prayers for people, and it disappeared. It survived the Reformation, and that's another story many bells did, but it disappeared then thereafter. But it's on the coat of arms of Glasgow. It arrived into the coat of arms because it was always on the seal of the borough and of the chapter of Glasgow. But here it is, I'm sure you all know, you see it, the bell in the all those lamp standards around different parts of Glasgow. And anyway, here is a detail of the railings in a garden behind the Provan Lordship, which is just across the street from St. Mungo's Cathedral. But what's been worked into the railings, this is by a man called Jack Scott, I think from 1995, but he's worked the bells here into the railings very nicely, I think. And also, I think these pointed ovals here are the seals, or this like the seal matrix of the cathedral. So it's St. Nicholas's garden, all right, and I read that there's Nicholas iconography built into this ironwork. I'd have to go back and check it all out, but anyway, clearly this is Kentigern's bell that has been worked into the iron, into the railings just across the way from his cathedral. And I'll just finish with a salutary tale in that we have two bells that are very alike, that were always, and the one on the right I've known about for a long time. It was acquired by the National Museum in Dublin about 1942, and so it was one of the first ones. When I started looking at bells, of course I saw that one too, but I was always suspicious of it because it's too fresh. It doesn't look like the others, and it's too fresh, too sharp. And yet the provenance is said to be the ruined chapter house of Christ Church Cathedral in Dublin, and you couldn't really get a context to beat that. That's pretty good as a context, and it's ruined to foundation level. It's just inside the railings on the Lord Edward Street side of Christ Church. So I always said, I have to give this the benefit of the doubt. Here's this bell supposed to be from the chapter house. Could somebody have found it in that foundation in the 19th century, you would say? So I always gave it the benefit of the doubt. But then around about 2000, somebody came into the Ulster Museum with the bell on the left, and it had been bought at a heap sale, but we were able to trace it back to the person who had sold it, and had come from Goodland, Townland, Bin Van, which is a National Trust little farm cluster down on the coast there above Murlough Bay, and there's a little church just adjacent. And this bell is beautifully patinated, and it has a rusty iron handle, so I just thought, well, this one validates this one. And so they really are two ancient bells. And the thing to note is that the crown of the bell has two integral bronze collars that are raised on the crown, and this one has them too. And then the iron handle, which is very horizontal in its grip, less so in this, but it's then set in with kind of buffer terminals set into the top of the bell. Anyway, just before the Bells book was going and we were just finishing the catalogue, I happened to be trawling, as I do, for bell information online, and I found these on an Australian website. And here's your raised collars, here's your buffer-ended iron handle, and these were made by James Barwell in Birmingham in the 1860s and 70s and exported all over the world, Australia in particular, where these ones are. So I said to myself, saved by the bell, as it were. Our two are clearly 19th century. The Goodland one and the one allegedly from Christchurch Cathedral. They're both 19th century bells, courtesy of James Barwell. And this is the last one. He has inscribed one of his really interesting motto, I think. He says on this one, and who can disagree with it? Success to bullock drivers. And we won't argue with that sentiment, friends. So I'll leave you on that note. Thank you very much.